Hello from the Australian National University College of Law and a warm welcome to our 2020 Virtual Open Week webinar on clinical placements and internships. My name is Tom and I'm delighted to be joined today by two of our senior academics who oversee these dynamic programs, as well as two of our students who will be sharing their experiences. Joining me today, I've got Associate Professor Anthony Hopkins, who's the Director of Clinical and Internship Courses, Dr. Jonathan Liljeblad, who's a Senior Lecturer and Director of Internship Courses. And from our students, I've got Joyce Yang, who's a Bachelor of Arts and Laws Honours student who undertook the Prison Legal Literacy Clinic, and Sunny Scott, who's another flexible double degree student here, doing a Bachelor of Commerce and Laws Honours. And Sunny's going to be talking about his involvement in the Community Law Clinic. Before I go any further, I'd like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal and the Ngambri peoples, who are the traditional custodians of this land and the airwaves on which we're meeting today, and pay respect to the elders of these nations, both past and present. I'd also like to extend this respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in attendance today in this webinar. Now, law becomes real in action, and there are few better examples of this than the clinical programs and internships. I want to begin by getting a sense of the scope of clinics and internships that are offered here at the college and understand how these enrich our students' legal education. Anthony, can you tell us more about what we have here at the college for students in terms of internships and clinical programs? And to ask a basic question, what's the difference between a clinical program and an internship?
Sure, thanks Tom. At ANU Law, we understand that learning comes alive when it's put in action. Many of our students come to law with a powerful motivation to use law for the benefit of others, our society, and the environment. Clinical and internship courses give them a chance to do just this. What students find is that when they're working directly with clients or with lawyers in practice or in delivering legal education, law matters. And then the pieces of the law puzzle start to come together in this process. It's a process really of theory being put into practice and crystallising. And all of this enables them to think about and to shape their careers based upon these experiences. So coming to your second question about the difference between clinical and internship courses, I'll just give a brief outline of our clinic courses and then I'll hand over to Jonathan, who'll talk about internships. So our clinical courses take various forms, all have a separate course convener. So that's a dedicated academic who runs a seminar program for the students. Most, but not all, have a host or partner organisation. So to give some examples, we have a clinic with legal aid called the Youth Law Clinic, and that involves students giving directly engaging with clients in the process of providing advice in conjunction with a lawyer that they work with. We've got another clinic, Canberra Community Law, and Sunny will be speaking about that. They provide legal services for people experiencing disadvantage in areas such as housing, social security and homelessness. Also an environmental law clinic, which is partnered with the Environmental Defenders Office, both locally in the ACT and nationally. We've got a long-standing partnership with ACT Corrections. Joyce will be speaking about her experience with the Prison Legal Literacy Clinic, which delivers legal education and literacy at the Alexander McConaughey Centre, which is the ACT's only prison. On top of that, we've got the International Law Clinic, which picks up cutting-edge legal issues built upon our strength in international law here at ANU. The Myanmar Clinic, Legal Education Research and Experiential Learning in Myanmar. Jonathan will speak about that. And on top of that, we've got some really important Indigenous justice partnerships, which are key to our clinical programs and offerings. Firstly, there's the Kimberley Aboriginal Justice Clinic, which sees students working in a remote office for the Kimberley Community Legal Service. They work remotely from the Kimberley by being in an office at ANU and providing paralegal services. And we're in the process now of developing in a partnership with the North Australian Justice Agency, a course to be run at Uluru in April for the first time, a pilot that we hope will be of long standing, called Legal Education for True Justice, Indigenous Perspectives and Deep Listening on Country. And that'll involve sitting down with Indigenous lawyers, traditional owners on country, and really getting a sense of what law means from their perspective, which is going to be critical to our students' capacity to be leaders in the Indigenous justice space, both our Indigenous and our non-Indigenous students going forward. Internships, I'll hand over to Jonathan to talk about the difference there.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony, and thanks, Tom, for organizing this. The internships are meant to be a way of allowing students to get academic credit for workplace engagements, so outside of the ANU campus. So students are free to pursue internships at a range of different kinds of workplaces. So this includes NGOs, government offices, private practice, and students can get academic credit for these internships by enrollment through a unit called Laws 4230 or Laws 6230 if you're an LLM student. The location of these internships can be inside Australia or outside of Australia. And so we recognize both types of scenarios. In addition, the internships can be self-arranged. So the students are identifying and arranging internships at a place of their own choice. But then they can also, we also have partnered internships where we have strategic institutional relationships with particular partners. And the partners will then go ahead and have a competitive application process for students coming from ANU. During COVID-19, we've been following certain protocols regarding in-place internships or placements, and predominantly have been instead doing virtual internships. So that is very much an opportunity that is available to students. And so the main criteria is that there's some portion of the internship, approximately 12 days, for which a student will be producing some kind of an independent research paper tied to the work at the internship. And that's the main focus, but otherwise we're trying to maintain and preserve as much flexibility as possible so students can take the full experience of what's happening at the workplace and get a full opportunity to have a clinical, practical experience.
And Joyce, as we heard before, you have taken part in the Prison Legal Literacy Clinic, which was established a decade ago by students in our research and policy group, Law Reform and Social Justice. Can you tell us a little bit about this clinic and what motivated you to decide to take it?
So myself and 5 other law students visited the Alexander McConaughey Centre each week with the aim to improve detainees' understandings of the legal system. So we were placed in the therapeutic communities section, which housed around 28 detainees with substance abuse issues. And we'd sit down with them every week and talk about areas of the law that they were interested in. So in our case, we did sessions on the criminal justice system, and unfortunately, we didn't get to go through all of it because of COVID, but we did get to have some good discussions about the structure of the criminal justice system and touch on some legal issues that proved to be even confusing for law students, for example, bail. And that certainly highlighted the importance of the clinical and how we need to educate members of our society more broadly. In terms of what motivated me, that's a really interesting question. The clinical was really centered around legal education, and that was really what motivated me initially to choose it. I've always been passionate about legal education. I think a lot more can be done in that space by our professionals. I picked the clinical because I wanted to play a more active role in improving access to justice and bridging that gap between legal professionals and the members of the community that we serve, particularly more vulnerable members who may find the law quite inaccessible. I think the clinical was really important for that purpose, but the interesting thing is if you ask myself and the other students who did that clinical with me, we would all say we learned a lot more from the detainees than they learned from us. So for me personally, my big realization in terms of my motivations for choosing the clinical was that while they were definitely compassionate and well-intended, they were also laced with a lot of preconceptions and bias that I didn't actually realize I had until I did the clinical. And that's what made this experience so special for me. I came out of it realizing that I needed to reevaluate the way I approach my own altruistic interests and the way I see justice. The course was really quite an emotional experience. It involved building a connection with a group of detainees and took a lot of listening and trying to have as open of a mindset as possible. And that's what really made me grapple with my initial motivations, because I realized I just couldn't do a lot of things that I thought I could do. For example, understanding anyone else's situation. I had to accept that the most I could do was try to get rid of my own biases. And that really took being honest with myself and my views and my own position of power and privilege within our society. So my motivations were altruistic, but what made this experience unique and memorable for me was that it really challenged my initial reasons for choosing the clinical in the first place.
Yeah, that's so great to hear. And you're currently working in the legal profession. Can you tell me a little bit about the skills that you gained from this internship and how you're applying them in your role today?
Yeah, so my current work is at Legal Aid. My role is split into two. So I'm the paralegal coordinator at the Youth Law Centre, and I'm also the community legal education paralegal. So as part of that, I do a lot of client work with young people who've crossed paths with the law. And I also do a lot of legal outreach for Legal Aid, representing them more broadly, mostly online right now, but it's picking up a little bit more in real life. I gained a lot of skills from the prison clinical that were transferable to my current work. Obviously, the legal education aspect of it is closely linked. I certainly built a lot of legal skills through researching legal information for the sessions with the detainees, but I also gained a lot of soft skills from delivering them. For example, it's helped with my client interactions and my listening and my communication ability. But really the most significant skill I gained from the clinical was learning how to pay attention to difference in a mindful way. And by that, I mean a way that's conscious of how we interact with others, a way that recognizes dynamics of power and privilege that exist in our society, and a way that's critical of our legal system and how it impacts on equality. Being in the room with the detainees was a really confronting experience for me, because I remember I went into that first session thinking, I want to try and understand their experiences. I thought that somehow trying to understand was the goal and was pivotal to effective outreach. But the more I talked to the detainees, the more I realized that firstly, I couldn't understand the situations. I haven't struggled with the same issues that they have, and I've never been involved with the legal system. I've only really seen it from the other side through learning about it in my degree and through my legal experiences. So that made me think a lot about my position in society and how I was actually contributing to categorizing other people without ever having my own similar lived experiences. So from that, I realized it was much more helpful to reframe my approach as recognizing that difference exists, observing it, and trying to connect across it. So I also began to think more deeply about legal concepts that I'd never really given any independent thought to outside of my studies. When it struck me how important it was to observe other people's differences, I started thinking about how these differences impact on their experiences with the law. And then I started questioning concepts that I've always just kind of accepted without thought throughout law school. For example, blind justice. I started thinking about whether concepts like that are actually just, or whether there's perhaps an irony in justice being blind that perpetuates cycles of disadvantage. Once I started thinking more critically and changing my mindset towards empathizing across difference and forming connections, it was really easy to see that the detainees are a lot more similar to me than they are different. And that was a really confronting realization that I've brought with me in all my client interactions since. So my clinical experience has been crucial to my current work. Every time I talk to a client now, I remember what I learned from the detainees, and how hearing about their experiences really challenged me and humbled me. And I do my best to try and empathize with clients' differences, as opposed to trying to think I can or should somehow understand anyone else's experiences that I haven't experienced myself. I also realized how important the clinical was for my own legal education. Without it, I would have missed such an amazing opportunity for personal and professional growth. So as COVID restrictions ease and the next lot of ANU student paralegals come into the Youth Law Centre for their ANU clinical, I'm really hoping to incorporate a lot more legal outreach with them so that more students have that opportunity to see the importance of legal education and of connecting across difference that the traditional model of classroom learning, unfortunately, just doesn't offer to the same extent.
That's great. Thanks so much for sharing, Joyce. Anthony, I want to come back to you just with another, I suppose, a fundamental question about clinical programs and internships. When can a student undertake them? And is it compulsory for students to have this experience as part of their law degree?
It's not compulsory, although it's something that we would encourage, and particularly for those students who have come to law with a real motivation to try to make a difference in the world. It becomes, as we've just heard from Joyce, can become a really significant and foundational experience that then is with them for the rest of their lives and helps to shape their career. So because it is putting learning into action, it's not available until second year. Or after second year. So, you become eligible to apply. It's still a competitive application process as these clinics are much sought after, but you become eligible and students are typically taking it from second year and onwards through to the end of their degree, taking these clinical courses.
One of the clinical programs that we offer is with Canberra Community Law, located just a stone's throw from the ANU campus here in Canberra, which is where you undertook a 4-month placement, Sunny. Can you tell us a bit about the program you're involved in and what your role was?
Yeah, so at Canberra Community Law, I was actually lucky enough to work with my supervisor in the Dirrang Aboriginal Human Rights Program, which is essentially a service dedicated to Indigenous clients. So the sorts of matters we got to deal with were quite varied. We had clients who were seeking help getting access into public housing and things like that, as well as some discrimination complaints, and yeah, sort of a very diverse kind of range of issues that we dealt with there. So these are all issues that Canberra Community Law dealt with in general, but I guess my role was to assist Indigenous clients specifically.
Yeah, when you were thinking about what internship to take or clinical programs, did you have something Canberra Community Law clearly on your mind, or can you tell me about that process of what that was like in assessing which one would be the best one for you, or what you wanted to gain from it?
Yeah, so I think Canberra Community Law, I think it just had such a broad kind of range. And I guess I kind of wanted to get my fingers stuck into sort of whichever kind of area that I could, and just try to sort of get a feel for a very diverse kind of, range of legal issues and things to sort of deal with. So yeah, I thought Canberra Community Law would be a good option there.
Yeah, and for many students, this kind of experience is enriched by working alongside legal professionals, both rising and seasoned ones, who may also become sort of career mentors. What was it like for you when you were working with your supervising solicitor, and how has that shaped your own career outlook?
Yeah, so I really enjoyed working with my supervisor in particular. I found her super inspiring. And everyone, like, you could see that she was definitely passionate about her work. And I think that passion really rubbed off on me quite early. And so, yeah, everyone was really lucky at Canberra Community Law because all the supervisors were really friendly and really approachable. I must admit, at some points it was a little nerve-wracking getting stuck into the legal work, but my supervisor was sort of really encouraging. And I never really felt completely overwhelmed. So yeah, it was a really good experience working with Parastu.
Great. Now, Jonathan, we've spoken a lot about these incredible domestic internships that our students can take. However, there are also other types of experiences they can have overseas. Now, the pandemic has obviously changed the reality of having the pandemic's obviously changed this a great deal, and a lot of these opportunities have been grounded, but it hasn't stopped students from taking on virtual internships. Can you tell us a little bit about what these are and how they work?
Right. So with the virtual internships, so a lot of workplaces, because of various COVID-19 protocols, have asked people to work from home. And so with the virtual internships, the students are following those protocols alongside everyone else. The main thing, at least in terms of getting academic credit through laws 4230, is that there's going to be someone who's a legal supervisor who's sort of overseeing the work that's being distributed to the students online. And then communications can be via email, phone, Zoom, whatever works from the supervisor standpoint. Because of this, there's flexibility for internships that are inside or outside Australia. For the ones that are outside Australia, this is a much broader component of our international strategy. And the idea there is that it's not just for domestic Australian students who are looking for opportunities overseas, but also for international students at ANU who are also looking for internship opportunities. And so we're trying to welcome and facilitate the opportunities in places outside of Australia. And the virtual internship is definitely part of that component because that means it opens the doors for a broader array of students to sort of take those kinds of situations. In the past, before COVID-19, we had students doing internships in places such as Singapore, Cambodia, Malaysia, the United Kingdom, Ireland, Japan, China. Because of COVID-19, one of the things we have to monitor is the protocol that exists in these other countries as well as the protocols that exist here. But if they're virtual internships, then students are very much able to do it. And then the only precondition at that point is do the workplaces in these other countries recognize and work through online interns or online internships.
And you've taught and been involved with clinics and at law schools in Australia and internationally. What is it that makes ANU, do you think, unique in terms of the clinics and internships that it offers students?
Yeah, so this is very much something that sort of attracted me coming to ANU, was that compared to a lot of other universities, not just other universities in Australia, but a lot of other universities that I've been at in other countries, ANU is very much committed to providing students opportunities outside of Australia. So ANU is very much committed to sort of this international experience. And, this is not just internships overseas, but also clinics overseas, as well as study trips or study tours overseas. And so I think that ANU is expending a greater proportion of energy, a greater proportion of its faculty, a greater proportion of its research and teaching resources to facilitating this kind of outreach. And so I think it's a very positive thing, at least from my perspective, because it allows our students to recognize that there's a much broader array of experiences that exist not just in Australia, but out in the larger world. I think it also makes students much more sensitive to a lot of the issues that affect people, not just in Australia, but outside of Australia. And as a result, it makes students much more empathetic towards the different kinds of experiences that people encounter and the different kinds of challenges and issues that legal professionals are likely to encounter. This kind of diversity, I think, is necessary as we move towards a much larger or much broader globalized future, which was, in my mind, at least from my perspective, is going to witness a much greater array of cross-cultural transnational engagements. It's not something that's necessarily going to be by choice. I think it's coming whether or not we choose it. And so I think that it's something that we need to be prepared for, and we need to go ahead and become accustomed to it. So I think with ANU, I think ANU recognizes what's coming down the pipeline in the future. And I think it's making a committed effort to go ahead and prepare our students for what's happening. and what's going to be happening in the future.
Yeah, that's great. I want to wrap up by getting your quick tips for our future law students here at ANU. Firstly, to our academics, Jonathan and Anthony, what advice would you give to students who are still unsure where their passion in law lies, even in the later years, in choosing a clinic or internship? Does it have to align with your planned career pathway to be meaningful? Anthony, do you want to take that one first?
Yes, happy to take that one. Thanks. Now, I think the key is that you may not know when you start law where your career or where your best fit may be, and I think it's incumbent on all of us and all students to stay open to the possibilities. But one of the things I think is really important is to think what drew you to law, or what draws you to law in the first place. And to think about what those core values that may already exist, those passions that may already be there, and then to see the clinical and internship courses as an opportunity to explore, to see whether in fact this particular career could fit with you, whether this is a way that you can practice law in a way that will be meaningful, sustaining, and enable you to contribute in the way that you hope to be able to contribute with your degree. So I think there's a question of being open to possibilities and using that exploration, but also always coming back to, well, what is it that really drives you? What is your core passion? And finding ways to connect with that through your law degree is actually a wonderful way to drive the learning, to keep the learning relevant, and to set yourself up in the best possible way for a fulfilling career in law after you leave law school.
Yeah. How about you, Jonathan? What advice do you give to students when they come to you saying, I don't know which one is the best fit for me?
Yeah, I mean, very similar to what Anthony had mentioned. The way I sort of look at it is that there's a tendency for a lot of students to think that they're going to make decisions about the rest of their lives right now. And I think that's a little bit, that's probably not the healthiest attitude, because the problem is that you're having to make decisions about things that you don't know. So you're making decisions about life based on imperfect information. I think a much healthier attitude is to just recognize that the human experience is about learning. There are things that we don't know we don't like, or we don't know that we do like. And the other component too is that as part of the human experience, things that we may like now are not necessarily going to be the things that we are going to like later on. And that we mature as we get older, and that our maturation is a function of our experiences. And so the key point, I think, for me to sort of convey to all students is just to go ahead and do that. Just experience, right? And accumulate as many experiences as you possibly can. And so that you do accumulate sort of this base of knowledge from which you then can make a much, I wouldn't say a perfect decision or have perfect information, but less imperfect information to make a wise decision about the future. And so the clinics and internships are providing those kinds of opportunities to go ahead and try to explore things that you think you like, or that you don't know that you might like, and to then go ahead and accumulate the experiences. And, to my mind, the more experiences, the better.
Yeah, that's definitely a good message. Joyce, I want to finish with you. Can you tell us your advice to students on making the most of their clinical programs and internships? It sounds like you had a very transformative experience, and it's really put you on the path of success in your current role. Looking back from planning to placement, is there anything that you would have done differently, or anything that you wish you knew at that time?
Not so much things I would have done differently, but my advice to students are, well, your clinical and your internship experience are what you make of it, regardless of your legal experiences beforehand. I think that these experiences are so unique and they're so eye-opening, and there's a lot to learn from them. So I would say plan your degree so that you can fit a clinical internship or both. I did a law internship at the Legislative Assembly, and then I did my clinical at the Alexander McConaughey Centre. And they were both such vastly different experiences that both allowed me to grow a lot. I'd say apply for a clinical internship that resonates with your interests or what you think you might be interested in, and then just go with the flow. Experience it, go in with an open mind. What I wish I did more was talk to people and realize there's a lot to learn from everyone. If I could go back and do something differently, it would be speaking to more people and not being scared to start conversations or ask questions that I was curious about. I think lastly, be really creative with your clinical and internship assessment tasks. One of the best things for me about the clinical and internship programs was that you're really encouraged to think outside the box and pursue a topic that you're really interested about and really passionate about. And that's something that you don't really get in a lot of the more traditional law courses. So it's definitely something that I've cherished in my experiences.
Look, I think it's really important to just kind of dive straight into the deep end. I know it can be a little bit nerve-wracking, particularly because it would be your first experience for most students at any type of legal practice, but it's really where the good stuff is and where you get the most out of it. So dive into the deep end, sort of take all the opportunities you can to interact with clients and go to meetings and go to court or the tribunals as much as possible. And yeah, just really get stuck into it.
That's great. Well, I want to take the opportunity to say thank you to everyone on our panel today for this informative discussion. It's been so good to hear your insights and to learn about the experience and professional skills that students can gain here at ANU through the clinical programs and internships that we have on offer. Just a reminder. Sorry, yes, Anthony.
Sorry, Tom. I just thought before we finished, I might just pop in with one other a bit of information I think is really important for students, and that is the link between the law reform and social justice program, the volunteer programs that can really set students up. So even before you're doing clinicals and internship courses, even from the point of first year, you can look for law reform or social justice groups that are doing work, law in action, motivated by other students, finding that space to connect, as Joyce is talking about, to other students to develop your interests and motivations and get talking. And all of that can shape you towards your clinical and internship course as well, setting you up well for the application stage.
That's a great point to finish on. And we'll make sure that we include links to resources for LRSJ and other internship and clinical program information on those things. So thank you very much for that, Anthony. Just a reminder to our audience, if you'd like to learn more about other student perspectives, please be sure to check out these resources in our virtual Open Week BizBo space for ANU College of Law, or you can visit our website. The link is in our description. Thank you very much again for joining us for this session, and best of luck. We hope to see you at ANU soon.